Today we're going to be talking about Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay. So last week at E3 I was very lucky. The day before I flew home I got to see a Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay demo. And this was a brand new demo, different to what we saw last year at E3 and also the gameplay demo that's online. Unfortunately, they haven't released anything significant from this gameplay demo. It did last about 40 minutes, and if any of you guys were watching the Xbox conference, the bit where Keanu Reeves points at the screen and they ran like a little trailer, there's some parts of that trailer that were in this gameplay, and whenever I talk about a part that's relevant I will show you, so maybe you can build up an idea in your head of what was going on and what things kind of looked like, and I'll do my best to explain the gameplay, the mechanics, without going into too much detail and boring your socks off. Luckily, the gameplay that we were shown is apparently being released at PAX West, which is at the end of August. I don't know if it will be exactly the same, but you're going to have to wait till then to get a proper idea of what I'm talking about here. But I saw a live gameplay demo. It was on a huge screen from a projector. It was on a high-end PC. They didn't tell me the specs. And in the middle of the room there was a CD Projekt Red employee called Julia playing with a controller. At the front there was another dev there. I don't remember his name, I'm sorry. And he was explaining what's going on and just giving us a bit of context about what we were going to see. And you may have already read some previews and heard some things about this demo, but I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on it. Did it look as good as last year's demo? Did they show anything different? What more did we learn about the game? Well, let's get stuck in. So first off, the demo began and they gave us a quick rundown of some of the customization options for your character, and plenty of these were not shown last year. So we had stuff like makeup options, hair, tattoos, all that kind of stuff that will all be available, and there'll be way more of it at launch. And they briefly then touched on the 3 different backgrounds or stories that you can choose for your character. What happened to them? Are they a nomad? Are they a street kid? Or are they corporate? And all of these decisions will have an impact on the way that you're able to communicate with the world around you, as does the gender that you choose. And in the instance of this demo, they chose corporate, but having seen the demo, it seems that we had extra dialogue options if we had picked street kid due to the nature of the mission. So I think that this is saying choosing between those 3 backgrounds will have big implications in the game, and obviously will lead to you wanting to have multiple playthroughs and experiencing different things and missions and opening up dialogue with certain story characters. We also got a glimpse at the skill and ability tree, which was broken down into strength, agility, intelligence, cool, etc. Yes, there's a cool factor, but it also had gun specifics if you prefer one over the other. So rifles, two-handed weapons, shotguns, etc. There appears to be a good scope here to make your character your own. And then the gameplay really begins, and the demo opens up with the introduction of Johnny Silverhand, played by Keanu Reeves, who turns out to be an hallucination or ghost-like companion, I suppose, that you can only see and communicate with. No one else can see them, it appears, but you don't really know if they're helping you, have they got their own objective, what's going on here. But according to the dev, he will have more lines of dialogue than the protagonist does, so clearly Keanu plays a very important role in this particular story. And during this initial conversation, he convinces you to go and help his girlfriend, Alt Cunningham, by getting in contact with a woman known as Brigitte, and she is the leader of the Voodoo Boys, someone who may hold more info on a mysterious brain chip that holds the secret to immortality. It's pretty important, so I guess that it's in your best interest to get her on your good side. So this year's demo saw the player in a place called Pacifica, which had an incredibly different vibe to last year's Night City. So I'll be showing the gameplay from last year on the screen now, but you get the idea. It was just packed full of detail and lights, neon signs, bright lights everywhere. But in this Pacifica place, it was all downtrodden, and it was replaced with half-built hotels and abandoned company buildings, roads and railways. And Pacifica was supposed to be a place where the wealthy could live lives of luxury, but it got hit by a big economic crisis and it fell into disrepair, and all the big corporations pulled out they left the city for the poor, all the construction stopped and it just became a bit of a free-for-all. And it's definitely a stark contrast to last year's demo, and for me it felt a bit bland in comparison, likely due to the fact that it's not a city teeming in lights. The colour palette was completely different, barren, dusty, but still there were a few NPCs in there. It will be interesting to see if there are other areas to this game and how different they are to the two that have been shown already. Will we get to see more rural areas of this world? I think that could be cool. So playing as male V is the name of the main character, we took a stroll over to a futuristic motorcycle. It's very Akira, and we hopped on, and then the player can choose between third person or first person, and we were shown different radio stations like in Grand Theft Auto that you can choose from. We go from A to B, kind of avoiding the danger, and we take off, roaming the streets searching for our quest. It looks like that the player will have a choice of a few different vehicles to drive. No word on whether you can customize the vehicles, but that would definitely be a bonus. Remember, no loading screens here either, and the bulk of the demo was comprised of the same mission through two different perspectives and two different playstyles, one with the male V as what they call a net runner, and this is a very stealthy hacker build, and the other, which was a heavily action focused female V, which was a strength run and gun build. And the mission was to infiltrate the premises and hack a surveillance van that holds information that could be trouble for Night City's underworld. And standing in the way of that van was a booster gang called the Animals, and these are a faction of really muscular bodybuilder types who modify their bodies with illegal enhancement drugs rather than going down the route of physical augmentations like the Maelstrom that we saw in last year's demo. So the stealth hacker playthrough was up first, and this showed us that it's entirely possible to sneak all the way to the target vehicle without being noticed at all. This included all types of melee takedowns and hiding of bodies in garbage chutes, and this also aided the players in being able to finish the entire game without killing a single enemy. CD Projekt Red have apparently listened to feedback and made that a possibility, and we also saw a scene where later on, we'll talk about it, where you fight a boss and instead of just instantly dying when you deplete their health bar, they collapse and kind of writhe around on the floor, and then you can choose to walk away to keep your hands clean, or alternatively you can shoot them dead. So that's how they're dealing with the boss fight mechanics if you want to do a completely clean hands play of the game. So the hacker build definitely interested me a lot more than the strength run and gun build, and there were some really interesting things that they were doing with the environment and the hacking here. You've got the basic stuff like hacking locked doors, turning off or manipulating security cameras, being able to hear conversations from a few meters away, making nice with enemy turrets so they are on your side. But not only that, but one of the coolest things that I saw in the demo was called a nanowire, and this is essentially the laser whip from Johnny Mnemonic. Old reference, terrible Keanu Reeves movie, but it's got some cool stuff in it. The visual effects kind of look like Wonder Woman's lasso of truth, but it's thinner, it's a lot shorter, and at close range you could use this to slice off limbs to decapitate enemies. At one point an enemy came bounding around the corner when you'd been noticed, and with an instant, a flick of the wrist, their head was severed off completely, and it goes all slow motion so you can really take in the gore. And funnily enough, the nanowire isn't just for combat, it can be used to access people's minds at close range. So there was another part of the demo where you hack the leader of a squad, and that gave you access to all of their cybernetic implants and all of the other people in their squad. So what followed in the gameplay demo was a series of brutal uses of this mechanic. For example, at one point the player hacks somebody's pin in their grenades. It flings out a few seconds later, boom, there's a bit of a mess to clear up. There was another moment where the player hacked an enemy NPC's arm, like their cyborg arm, and made them shoot themselves in the head. I don't know why I'm laughing, it's horrible, but it was very entertaining. There's a point where there's a guy in front of you on a gym bench, lifting some weights, doing a bench press, and they hack the lock in the weights. So, as you can imagine, once they do their lift, everything comes crashing down and crushes their head to smithereens. The best one though was, do you remember in the trailers where you see the guys in the boxing ring and they're practicing against an AI robot who's punching at them and they're dodging, blocking, all that stuff? Well, the player hacks the robot and it just instantly punches the guy's head off. Like you took control of the power that this thing was punching at, you hack it and then just off goes the head. It's great. And all this is done stealthily, so you'll never notice. The hacking and stealth playthrough, for me, it was just so much more interesting than what I'm going to describe next, which was the strength build. But for me, I think really in this universe, you want to be playing as a stealthy hacker type. I reckon that that's where you're going to get the best enjoyment out of the game based on the gameplay demos that I've seen. So they rewind time, switch to the female V, and then we get to see a hands-on with the strength build. So instead of hacking doors, which may alert enemies, this is much more focused on combat and strength, and they can just use their arms to tear a door open. Of course, that's noisy, so if there's someone nearby, they might hear you. And then they get into a couple of fights and they've got a big gun that they can use. At one point they go and tear out one of the mounted guns and just use that on the enemies. And you can even grab enemies as a shield and use them to push forward while shooting with the other hand. I don't know what it was about the strength build. Maybe it was just the gunplay, but it didn't look that engaging, to be honest. It was just a lot of hold mouse horn strafe as enemies run towards you. Whereas what they showed last year, the gunplay was way more interesting, where you had a dude shooting around corners and then you could combine that with running up a wall, and you've got the blades that come out of your arm and then you can use those to kill people. But they really focused on the gunplay in this part of the demo, and it just didn't really do it for me, to be honest. I much more enjoyed the hacking stealth element. So they complete the same bit that they did with the stealth playthrough, kill all the enemies. There's a lot of nice destruction here too, I have to admit. Lots of rubble, debris flying everywhere, it looked great. And then they move on with the female strength V into a section where you're in a little mini boss battle. I believe that this was against a lady who was just really hench, and the amount of enhancement drugs that she'd taken meant that she was tanky as hell and didn't really have a health reduction, so you've got to go for the weak spot on her back. And in true shooter fashion, she did have a tank on her back that was feeding her the juice, let's say. So once she'd destroyed that, she was almost putty and just went down incredibly quickly. And she did have a range of attacks, like one where she ran towards you, zipping from side to side. It was just a little bit of a boss arena, nothing too fancy. But of course, going through the same scenario as the hacker stealth build meant that we could have left the area without alerting any of the enemies at all and never come into contact with that little mini boss bit. There were some other bits and pieces in here, plenty of dialogue options along the way, so if you're into that kind of thing in your RPG shooters, that is there for you, like I mentioned at the start. Different moral choices you can make, characters that you can choose to help, money that you can choose to take or leave. There's all sorts of stuff going on, and it definitely impressed me. Aside from that, I've left a few bits out because they might be a bit spoilery. The only other thing I'll say is that right at the end of the demo, you go into this ice bath and kind of get plugged into the Matrix, which is, I think they called it cyberspace or something like that. So that could be a whole entire element and a different type of gameplay that they just haven't revealed yet. So it will be interesting to see what happens there. In comparison to last year's demo though, I have to admit that I wasn't as blown away as I was. I think CD Projekt Red, in their desire to hype up this new and exciting game, threw everything that they possibly had at the show last year to just show us what was possible in Cyberpunk, including more end-game content with an incredibly stylized V that you were playing as in the demo last year, with all of the enhanced cyberware, turning them into this deadly wall-running, shooting around corners and through walls, stealth spider madman. But this year's demo I felt was a bit of a call back to reality, a moment to digest the hype and take off some of the rose-coloured glasses of E3, and the realisation that yes, this is a real game for current gen hardware. Obviously I haven't played this game myself, I've never had hands-on with it as much as I'd have loved to, but my impressions thus far are just based off those two gameplay demos. With that said, that's all for today folks. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe for more, hit that bell for all notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.